Picture this. It is April 1961. You are sitting in a bright room inside the White House, and you are one of the smartest people in the country. Look around the table. These are not average men. One of them is a president who reads 3 books a week. A few of them are generals with medals running down to their belts. Some of them came straight from Harvard, and they have never failed at anything in their lives. If you could measure the raw brain power in this one room, the needle would snap off the dial. On the table in front of you sits a plan. The plan looks simple. You will drop a small group of fighters onto a beach in Cuba. They will land, they will spark an uprising, and a government will fall. Everyone around the table nods. The plan feels clean. The plan feels obvious. The plan feels like it cannot fail. Now imagine you have a bad feeling. Something about this does not add up. You start to open your mouth. And then you glance around the table one more time. Nobody else looks worried. The generals look certain. The president looks sure. So you close your mouth. You tell yourself these brilliant men must know something you do not. You swallow the doubt, and you nod along with everyone else. 3 days later, the plan collapses. The fighters hit the beach, and nothing happens the way the room promised. The uprising never comes. The other side captures more than 1,000 men in 72 hours. It becomes one of the worst decisions in American history, and the smartest people in the country made it together in a bright room with everyone nodding. Afterward, the president sits alone, and he asks himself one question he cannot answer. How could I have been so stupid? How could all of us have been so stupid at the same time in the same room? Hold on to that question, because it is the wrong question. What you're about to find out is that the problem was never the people in that room. It was the room itself. Stay with me. Here is what your gut expects. Smart people go in, so a smart decision should come out. Put 10 geniuses in a room, and you should get a genius answer. Simple. More brains, better choice. But watch what actually happens. Picture 2 rooms side by side. In the first room, you put 10 ordinary people. Nothing special. But they argue. They disagree out loud. One of them points at the plan and says, "Wait, this part is dumb," and nobody flinches. In the second room, you put 10 of the sharpest minds you can find. Every one of them is brilliant, and every one of them, more than anything, wants the room to agree. Now run the test. Which room makes the better decision? It is not close. The room full of geniuses loses. The ordinary room wins. And that should stop you cold, because it means intelligence was never the thing that mattered. Think about what a smart test actually measures. It measures how well one brain, alone, solves a puzzle. It does not measure whether 10 brains will tell each other the truth. Those are 2 completely different skills. And the second one is the one that saves you. Here is the cruel twist. The smarter you are, the better you are at building a case for whatever you already want to believe. Picture a brilliant lawyer who can argue any side of anything. Now point that lawyer's brain at the plan the room already loves. A sharp mind does not always hunt for the truth. Sometimes a sharp mind just builds a more beautiful wall around the mistake. So do not picture the people in a doomed room as idiots. Picture 10 brilliant wall builders, all cheerfully bricking up the only exit, proud of how neat the wall looks. There is an old experiment that shows the trap in about 10 seconds. A scientist named Solomon Asch sat one person in a room with a simple picture. 2 lines. One is clearly longer. A child could tell you which. Alone, the person gets it right every single time. But Asch added a trick. He filled the room with actors, and he told them all to say the wrong answer out loud, with total confidence. Short line? They point at the long one and call it long. Now picture yourself in that seat. Your eyes are screaming the truth. But one by one, everyone around you says the opposite, calmly, like it is obvious. And when your turn comes, something strange happens in your chest. A huge number of people, staring at a fact as plain as daylight, will open their mouths and repeat the lie the group just told. Not because they are stupid. These were normal, capable people. They cave because being alone in a room feels worse than being wrong in a crowd. So here is the paradox in one line. A smart group is not the smartest person in the room, multiplied. Very often, a smart group is worse than the dumbest choice any single one of them would have made alone. The question is why? Why would a brilliant person hand their judgment to the group? To answer that, we need the man who first cracked open that bright White House room and looked inside. His name was Irving Janis. He was a psychologist, and he became obsessed with that exact question. How does a room full of brilliant people march together straight off a cliff. So he studied the disasters. He started with the Bay of Pigs, and a pattern jumped out at him. The same pattern, again and again. Janis gave it a name. He called it groupthink. The moment a smart room stops thinking with 10 brains and starts thinking with one. And he found that groupthink shows up as a set of warning signs. Picture each one as a little scene, because every single one is something you can watch happen in a real room. The first sign. The whole group feels bulletproof. Picture the team huddled together with a glowing shield around them, chests puffed out, while a small dark storm cloud drifts overhead and not one of them looks up. Nothing bad can happen to us. We're too good, and we're too strong for that. The second sign. The group is sure it is the good guy. Picture every figure wearing a little halo, thinking, we're the good people here, so whatever we choose has to be the right thing. Once you decide you are good, you stop checking whether you are actually right. The third sign. The group explains away every warning. Picture a note sliding under the door with the word danger on it, and a hand reaching down, crumpling it into a ball, and tossing it over a shoulder while everyone keeps smiling. A bad fact shows up, and instead of facing it, the room quickly invents a clever reason it does not count. The fourth sign. The group turns outsiders into cartoons. Picture them drawing the other side on a chalkboard as a drooling, cross-eyed villain and laughing at it. Anyone who disagrees is not smart, or not serious, or not one of us. So their warning becomes easy to wave away. The fifth sign. You start editing yourself. Picture a stick figure with one hand halfway up, a doubt glowing in a thought bubble over their head. Then the hand comes back down, the bubble pops, and the doubt is gone. You had the objection. You just quietly decided it was not worth the trouble of saying out loud. The sixth sign, and this one is the quietest and the deadliest. Silence starts to look like agreement. Picture a room of heads nodding yes. But now float up above each head, and behind every calm mask is a small frowning face full of doubt. Almost everybody is secretly worried. And because everybody stays quiet, everybody assumes they must be the only one who sees the problem. The seventh sign. The one person who does speak up gets frozen out. Picture a single figure standing, raising a real objection, and the whole crowd slowly turning to stare, arms crossed, faces gone cold and hard. You only have to feel that stare once to learn to keep your mouth shut forever. And the eighth sign. Someone appoints themselves the guard at the door. Picture a figure standing like a bouncer, arms out, blocking a messenger who is running up with bad news, waving them off before they can reach the leader. Don't bother the boss with that. The group quietly seals itself off from the very facts that could have saved it. And here's the part that should give you chills. Almost every one of those signs showed up in that bright White House room in 1961. There were experts who had serious doubts about the plan. One advisor even wrote his objections down on paper and carried them into the building. And then he sat in the meeting and said almost nothing, because the mood in the room made speaking up feel impossible. Another man quietly made sure the worst of the doubts never reached the president's desk. The warnings existed. The doubts existed. They just died in people's throats, one polite silence at a time. 8 signs. Now notice something, because this is the whole point. Not one of them requires anyone in the room to be dumb. Every single one works better on smart, confident, loyal people who like each other. That is the trap. Groupthink is not a disease of fools. It is a disease of good teams. So now you know what groupthink looks like from the outside. But here's what nobody talks about, what it feels like from the inside. Because that's where it gets personal. Go back to that person in the Asch experiment, staring at 2 lines, about to lie. Scientists have put people in exactly that spot and looked inside their heads while it happened. And here's the strange part. When the group disagreed with them, the fear centers of the brain lit up. The body treated "everyone disagrees with me" like a real, physical threat, like a growl in the dark. To understand why, you have to go back a very long way. Picture a single stick figure, alone, out on an ancient plain at night. No fire, no group, just one small, soft, slow animal in the dark, with things out there that bite. How long does that figure last? Not long at all. For almost the whole history of our kind, getting kicked out of the group was not embarrassing. It was a death sentence. So your brain built a rule, and it built it deep, down where you cannot feel it working. Belong, no matter what. Stay inside the group, at almost any cost. A brain scientist named Matthew Lieberman found something that shows how deep that rule goes. He discovered that the pain of being left out and the pain of a physical injury run through the same wiring in your brain. Read that again slowly. To your brain, getting rejected by the group hurts in the same place as a broken bone. Social pain is not a figure of speech. It is real pain, running on the real pain circuit. So now walk back into that bright White House room with new eyes. When you swallowed your doubt, you were not being a coward. Your brain was doing its oldest job. It saw the group leaning one way, and it whispered the ancient warning. Speak up, and you might get pushed out into the dark, alone. And a two-line disagreement felt, on the inside, like a threat to your life. There is one more piece. Picture Stanley Milgram's famous experiment. He put ordinary people in a room and had a calm man in a lab coat tell them to do something they clearly knew was wrong. And most of them did it anyway. Picture the volunteer, sweating, glancing at the calm man, and pressing the button. Not because they were monsters. Because when someone we accept as the group's authority stays calm and nods, a huge part of us goes quiet and just follows the nod. And you do not need a lab coat or a war room to feel this. Picture a completely normal work meeting. Someone shares an idea, and around the table the heads start to nod. You happen to think it is a bad idea. You feel your heartbeat pick up. You feel the whole room leaning one way. And then you hear your own voice say, "Yeah, I think that could actually work." You did not plan to say it. It just came out. That tiny lie, in that tiny beige room, runs on the exact same ancient machinery that lost the beach in Cuba. Put it all together, and the picture is almost gentle, which is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Nobody in that room chose to be a fool. Every person there was running a simple, ancient program. Belonging beats truth. Stay in the warm circle. Do not be the one standing alone in the cold. That is the real engine under all 8 signs. Not stupidity. It is fear of the dark, wearing a suit and a tie. Now here is the twist that should genuinely scare you. You would think a close, happy, loyal team is the safe one. The team that trusts each other completely. The team that gets along, that finishes each other's sentences, that never fights. But flip it around. The tighter the team, the more each person has to lose by rocking the boat. So the tighter the team gets, the bigger its blind spot grows. The warmth is the danger. Let me show you 3 rooms. Picture a freezing morning in 1986, the night before the Challenger space shuttle launch. A group of engineers has spotted a problem. In the cold, a rubber seal on the rocket could go stiff and fail. One of them stands up and says it plainly. Do not launch tomorrow. But the team is proud. The team is under enormous pressure, and the team badly does not want to hear it. So the room leans on him. And picture his own boss turning to him and saying the line that says everything. Take off your engineer hat and put on your management hat. He sits back down. The hand comes down. The next morning, the shuttle breaks apart in a clear blue sky, in front of the whole watching world. Now picture a second room, years later, at a company called Enron. It was full of people who literally called themselves the smartest guys in the room, and they believed it completely. They were so certain of their own brilliance that questioning the numbers started to feel almost rude. Anyone who raised a hand looked like the one person who just did not get it. So the hand stayed down. The lie kept growing. And one of the biggest companies in America collapsed into dust and took thousands of people's savings down with it. Now picture a third room, and this one is recent. A company called WeWork, and a founder that everyone in the room adored. He was electric. He was magnetic. Being near him felt like standing next to the future itself. And when you love the person at the front of the room that much, disagreeing with him does not feel smart. It feels like a betrayal. So a company got a price tag of $47 billion, hung on a story that almost nobody in the room was willing to poke. Then somebody outside the room poked it. The story cracked, and most of that value vanished in a matter of weeks. 3 rooms. Different decades, different people, different stakes. The same shape every single time. The problem was never a lack of talent. Talent packed every one of those rooms right up to the ceiling. The problem was that the room got so warm, and so close, and so proud, that telling the truth started to feel like an act of war. And do not tell yourself this only happens to giant companies with billions on the line. It happens in a group of 4 friends planning a trip that everybody secretly knows is a mistake. It happens on a normal Tuesday, in a meeting nobody will even remember next week. Anywhere people like each other, and want to keep liking each other, the same warm trap is quietly waiting. The bigger the love in the room, the bigger the thing it can hide. So if being smart does not save you, and being a great, close team actually makes it worse, then what is left? What actually breaks the spell? Here's the good news. The fix is small. It is almost embarrassingly small. It is not a genius. It is not a fancy new strategy. It is one question, asked out loud, before the room agrees. The question is this: what would have to be true for this to be a terrible idea? Watch what that little question does to a room. Picture the whole team leaning one way, all nodding, the shield glowing, the storm cloud ignored overhead. Now one person says it out loud. What would have to be true for this to blow up in our faces? And suddenly the room has a new job it can finally do. Hunting for the crack is no longer an attack on the group. It has become the assignment. In one sentence, you just handed everyone in the room permission to say the scary thing. Because that is what was really missing the whole time. Not brains. Permission. A researcher named Amy Edmondson spent years studying the best teams in the world, trying to find what they had in common. And the thing she found was not raw talent. She called it psychological safety, which is just a fancy phrase for a very simple feeling. It is the feeling that you can say, I think we're about to make a mistake, and not get punished for it. Nobody will mock you. Nobody will freeze you out. Nobody will shove you into the cold. That turns out to be the whole ballgame. In a groupthink room, the doubt already exists. Remember all those frowning faces hiding behind the calm, nodding masks? The doubt is already sitting right there in the room. It just has nowhere safe to land. Psychological safety is simply what gives that doubt a place to land and be spoken. And there is one more small move that helps, and you can picture it in a second. In a bad room, the most powerful person speaks first, and everyone else just tunes their answer to match. So flip it. Picture the leader deciding to speak last. The boss stays quiet and asks the newest, quietest person in the room to go first. Now nobody in the room knows which answer the boss secretly wants, so for once they tell you what they actually think. And you can use both of these tonight. Picture your next group chat, where everyone is racing to pile on and agree. Be the one who types, okay, but what would have to be true for this to go really wrong? Picture your next real meeting, and instead of jumping in first with your own opinion, turn to the quietest person in the room and ask them what they honestly think. These are small moves. They are drawable moves. A single typed question, a single turn head, but each one quietly pokes a hole in the warm, dangerous silence and lets a little cold air in. So here is the one thing to carry out of this video. The next time you are in a room and everyone agrees a little too fast and it all feels a little too smooth, do not relax. Get nervous. Smooth is not always the sound of a good decision. Smooth is very often the sound of 8 people quietly deciding to stay inside the warm circle. Be the one who asks the question. Be the raised hand that does not come back down. It will feel, for a second, like standing alone out in the cold. But that one lonely voice is the crack that keeps the whole wall from falling. If this made you think differently about the groups you're part of, there's more where that came from. Every week on this channel, we take one big idea from history or psychology and follow it all the way down, until it says something true about the world you're actually living in right now. Subscribe if you want to keep going. Drop a comment telling me which part hit hardest. I read every single one. And if someone you know needs to hear this, send it to them. That's how this channel grows, and that's how we keep making these. I'll see you in the next one.